In early 2018, 25-year-old Trish Haynes told her family she was heading to New Hampshire to clear up a court matter. And then she vanished. In the months that followed, horrifying clues about what happened to her began to emerge until a shocking discovery was made 4 months later. A jawbone sealed inside a washing machine at the bottom of Grant Pond. Despite ample circumstantial evidence, no one has ever been held accountable for Trish's disappearance and murder. We'd like to say a special thank you to Trish's loved ones, Sandy, Valerie, Carrie Ann, and Chloe, for their help in putting together this episode and for allowing us to share Trish's story. Hey guys, and welcome to the Moms and Mysteries podcast, a true crime podcast featuring myself, Mandy, and my dear friend, Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Mandy. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a Saturday. We haven't done a Saturday schedule or Saturday recording in a while.
We haven't. Yeah, we haven't. It's a Saturday in May, and I know not everyone loves to hear us talk about the weather. It is hot, but that's not what I was going to say. I was actually going to say that we've actually had a few May showers the last few days, and we have needed the rain so bad. I have actually been loving it. We had a great thunderstorm last night, and I slept like a baby.
I do love a thunderstorm, but it just means frogs. Frogs and mosquitoes. That's
I'm looking
all
at one
I see
right
rain. No. No. Oh, no. I can't even think about this. Now it's like when I open my front door, I have to like shake it like 5 times to get off the lizards and the frogs and whatever else could be on there. So I'm glad you're enjoying the May flowers. Or no. Why are we getting May showers? Why are we not getting May flowers?
Oh, wait, why did I say
we
May
missed
showers like that was the normal? That's not even the way it's supposed to go.
No.
Well, we're getting April showers in May.
This whole thing
I really messed that one up.
But Mandy, we've had a lot of recording we've done lately. If you guys haven't listened, we redid our whole Casey Anthony story from the top. What am I trying to say?
You're just trying to say we
almost
did a new take on the Casey Anthony story.
Yes. And I really enjoyed how that turned out. I thought it turned out really
Me too.
Great. Yes. So if you haven't listened to that, that is up for you. And then on Thursdays, we have some really cool stuff coming up. This week, we have a guest coming on, and we are going to be discussing a trial that's happening, not Karen Reed, a new one, the Diddy trial. So if you want to get all caught up, we will have that for you on Thursday, so you'll know what's going on as this case unfolds.
Awesome. So we'll get into the story for today. This is really one that sticks with you, and not just because of how the story ends, but because of who it happened to. A young woman who was just trying to find her place in the world after enduring a childhood that left her craving real connection and belonging. Her name was Trish Haynes, and long before her name was printed in headlines, she was just a little girl who had already survived more than most people. Trish Danielle Haynes was born on July 22, 1992, in Stuart, Florida. The odds were stacked against her right from the start, as her mom, Megan, was just 15 years old, still really a child herself when she gave birth to Trish. Megan's relationship with Trish's father, Toby, was always rocky and never built to last, but things ultimately ended when Toby passed away from health issues while Trish was still very young. Trish's maternal grandparents, Sandy and Stephen, stepped in to help raise the little girl, and they were granted full custody of Trish when she was 3. Even before her grandparents adopted her, they were already her safe place and the people that she could always depend on. Trish was also close with her great-aunt Valerie, who felt like a second grandmother to her. While Sandy was devoted to raising Trish, she never tried to take the place of Trish's mom, and she even asked Trish to call her Gram so that Megan could still be mom, and Megan was always welcome to visit her daughter anytime. But the reality was often painful. Megan didn't always show up when she promised she would, and sometimes when she was there, she would be spending more time watching the clock than being present. And this pattern left Trish feeling heartbroken over and over again, while Sandy and Stephen tried their best to cushion the blow. They provided as much love and stability as they could, but of course some damage had already been done. Trish's early trauma left her with deep emotional scars and PTSD, and as she got older, it became clear that she was a lot more vulnerable because of it. Trish would often tolerate mistreatment just to feel like she mattered to someone. The family was originally from Florida, but at some point, Sandy and Stephen made the decision to move to North Carolina, and this was back when Megan and Toby were still together before he passed away. Their relationship had been so volatile that Trish's family just wanted to get her out of there for her own safety. Additionally, Sandy owned property in New Hampshire, so they would also visit there often. When Trish was 10 years old, the family went to New Hampshire for Sandy's son's wedding, and Trish was even the flower girl. But the trip ended up being a turning point because for the first time, Sandy really noticed that Trish didn't know anyone on that side of the family, and Sandy really wanted to change that. They soon moved to New Hampshire to be closer to the extended family in hopes that Trish might feel more rooted and feel more of a sense of connection to her family. While in grade school in New Hampshire, Trish met a girl named Ashley Ruff. She wasn't exactly a friend, though. She was kind of known for being a bully, and Sandy always tried to discourage Trish from associating with her. But Trish just had this really big heart and always saw the best in everyone, so she continued to be friends with Ashley.
Sandy said that when Trish was little, she'd prance around the house wearing her grandmother's high heels, and she just loved to play dress up and insisted that every day she had to wear something that matched. Sometimes Trish would go through multiple outfits in one day, which means a lot of laundry for Sandy, but of course she didn't mind. And this love of fashion was really more than just a phase. It was a passion for Trish. Trish dreamed of one day being a model, and she loved to pose for photos. But Trish also had a more rugged side to her. She was someone that wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. One day, a boy from the neighborhood actually asked her to go hunting, and she agreed, despite being dressed in a white dress and tights, which I don't know much about hunting, but I feel like that is not the typical attire. Yeah. I feel like you're going to get a little dirty there. And so Trish comes home. She's covered in mud, but she's smiling from ear to ear. And that was really just who she was. She was girly and glamorous one minute, fearless and playful the next. Trish's great aunt Valerie described her as being a kind-hearted and innocent girl who was still street smart in her own way. But still, she was someone that was very trusting, sometimes to a fault. Her cousin Carrie Ann said that Trish's naivety made her vulnerable, but Trish was always looking for the good in others and giving them the benefit of the doubt. Trish never forgot a birthday or a holiday and would always find a way to send her love, even if she couldn't be there in person. She really took care of her family, and she made sure that they never had to worry too much. When she lived in New Hampshire and her grandparents were back in Florida, she would call Sandy just to let her know that when she was walking to and from the store, especially if she was going alone. I'm very much that way still. Like, I want you to know where I'm at. But also, that's from growing up with, my dad, who was like, call when you get there, call when you leave, that kind of a thing. And you, know, especially being a parent now, how much of a relief that is for your kids to tell you that kind of stuff. Because then you're like, okay, they're safe. So it's very thoughtful of her to do that for others. As Sandy and Steve got older, they decided to permanently relocate to Florida, and Trish moved with them. In 2014, Trish met a man named Chris, and the two began dating. Their relationship would end up lasting about 3 years, but there were some red flags from the very beginning. Chris had recently been released from prison, so Trish's family had plenty of concerns. They, for one, didn't trust Chris, and as time went on, their opinion of him only worsened. At some point, Chris said he had a job lined up at a place called the Landmark Restaurant in North Woodstock in New Hampshire, so he wanted to go move up there. And Trish decided to follow him, and she packed up her things and moved from Florida back to New Hampshire with Chris and got herself a job washing dishes at the same restaurant that Chris was working at. Trish also worked as a housekeeper at a nearby hotel, but since she didn't have a vehicle, she had to walk to and from work most days.
To put it bluntly, Trisha's relationship with Chris was very abusive. Trish would often show up to work with visible marks on her body, and Chris was known to be very controlling. The owners of the Landmark Restaurant noticed Trisha's injuries and tried to help get her to safety, but she didn't want to leave Chris. Trisha's family also saw the signs of abuse. At one point, they noticed that Trish no longer had her beautiful long hair, but instead she had a shaved head. And Trish claimed that she had shaved her hair because some of the kids she babysat gave her lice, but that wasn't the truth. The truth was that Chris had coerced her into shaving her head after accusing her of looking at another man. Awful. By 2017, Trish had had enough. She finally wanted to leave Chris and even filed a domestic violence report against him. But when he found out he could be sent back to jail over it, he put immense pressure on Trish to take it back, and eventually she did. She recanted her statement. The police were aware that Chris was the one who had influenced this decision, and they warned that if Trish were to withdraw this complaint, they would have no choice but to charge her with filing a false police report, which is a charge that carried up to 7 days in jail. But Trish wasn't deterred. She never refiled the claim, and she was formally charged with filing a false police report. After this misdemeanor charge, Trish moved back to Florida to be closer to her grandparents again, which was a much-needed return to safety and to the people that loved her the most. However, in early 2018, Trish had to travel back to New Hampshire for her court date. She wanted to face this legal matter head-on, and she planned to get everything squared away so that she could just return to Florida and live there permanently. Trisha's family begged her not to go back to New Hampshire, but she said she just wanted to go make things right so this wouldn't be hanging over her head anymore. But once Trish was back in New Hampshire, things didn't go as planned, and the court date ended up getting pushed to April after a new public defender was assigned to her case, and they wanted some more time to review the documents. Since it was only January when Trish had first gone up there, Sandy encouraged her to just come back to Florida while she waited for the new court date. But Trish still refused and said that she wasn't leaving until she had tied up all of her loose ends there in New Hampshire. At first, Trish was staying with her friend Becky, who lived on a farm in the rural town of Rumney. There was no cell phone signal on this farm, and Becky was gone because she worked long hours. Trish didn't mind the arrangement at first, and keep in mind she thought that it would only be for a couple of weeks. But then when her court date got pushed to April, she started looking for somewhere else to stay that was a little closer to town. And that's around the time when she reconnected with someone from her past through Facebook, and that was her childhood friend, Ashley Ruff. And we're going to get into so much more of the story after a quick break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
You know those days when you're running on empty and the very last thing you want to do is figure out what's for dinner? Well, that's where sous vide comes in, and it's my knight in shining kitchen appliance. With sous vide, I can easily plan ahead, especially when life is feeling extra hectic. Just last week, I knew we had a busy day of school and doctor's appointments, so I actually got my food out in the morning and was able to have dinner ready to cook and be ready by the time we're ready to eat. Here's how it works. Sous vide is a smart countertop oven that combines a gourmet meal delivery service with the flexibility to schedule dinners how I want. You just tap the recipe card to your sous vide and it knows exactly how to cook the meal. It keeps everything cool in its fridge until it's time to start cooking. How cool is that? My favorite meal so far was the chicken with creamy garlic sauce and herby roasted cauliflower. It was like gourmet dining, but I didn't have to do anything except to set it up. Sous vide offers over 50 chef-designed meals each week with new options all the time. And if you have dietary preferences, there's no problem. You can choose from keto, vegetarian, fit and balanced, or family-friendly meals. Plus, they can accommodate any allergies. And if you feel like getting creative in the kitchen, you can always cook with your own ingredients, which means you can make your own recipes in the sous vide too. Plus, the newest sous vide 3.0 model has 15 plus cooking modes, including air fry, bake, slow cook, sous vide, and more. So it can really handle any recipe. Stop the takeout cycle and start enjoying wholesome home-cooked meals with sous vide. It's a game changer and it comes with a 100-day risk-free trial. Try it today. Go to sousvide.com/moms to get 16 free meals when you order. That's sousvide.com, SUVIE.com/moms, that's moms with an S, to get 16 free meals with your risk-free trial. Last week, I took an incredible cruise. I had so much fun, but as I was packing, I realized something pretty surprising. About 75% of the clothes I was bringing with me were from Quince. Things like linen pants, dresses, silk tops, you name it. And I actually hadn't even planned to do that, but every single piece was just so high quality and so easy to mix and match that I just didn't want to wear anything else. One of my favorites was a pair of linen pants and this gorgeous silk top. I was able to wear the silk top with the linen pants one night, and then I mixed it up with the Quince skirt for a totally different look the next night. The versatility, of course, is amazing, but the quality from Quince is unreal. Everything feels very luxurious without feeling like I'm overpaying. And that's one of the best parts. Quince gives you all that elevated style for a fraction of what you pay at other luxury brands. Their prices are 50 to 80% less, and I can confidently say the quality is just as good, if not better, than some of those other high-end labels. Plus, it's not just about great looks. Quince's pieces are made with ethical and responsible manufacturing practices, so I can feel good about what I'm wearing. So whether it's linen shorts, luxe swimwear, or even those Italian leather sandals, I know I'm getting high-end craftsmanship that's built to last. So this summer, I'm planning to wear my Quince pieces everywhere, whether I'm on vacation or just running errands where I want to pretend I'm on vacation. And if you're looking for affordable luxury and high-quality pieces that last, I can't recommend Quince enough. Trust me, you'll love it all. Treat your closet to a little summer glow-up with Quince. Go to quince.com/moms for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's quince.com/moms to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/moms. And now back to the episode. So before the break, we were discussing the life of Trish Haynes. At this point in the story, she is waiting for this court appearance she has to make for filing a false police report a few months before. She has nobody really to stay with up there, so she is staying with someone her family would rather her not stay with, which is a friend from her past that she reconnected with over Facebook, and that friend is Ashley Ruff. Ashley was going by Ashley Smith at this time, and she was living in Grafton with her husband, Doug, and Trish arranged to move in with them. Becky dropped Trish off at a gas station in Canaan, New Hampshire, where Ashley and Doug picked her up and took her to their place in Grafton. According to the Murder, She Told podcast, Doug and Ashley were renting a house on 9.5 acres located at 225 Main Street, and there were several outbuildings on the property. Sandy was really uncomfortable with this situation. She had never trusted Ashley, and she warned Trish to stay away from her. And Trish had her own hesitations. According to Becky, Trish had said something along the lines of, maybe I shouldn't be going there because Grammy really doesn't like Ashley, which is so sad because, you can see she knows this isn't right, but I feel like this is somebody that's just lost in trying to figure out, just wants to settle this thing and then live her life. But Trish was hopeful that things would really work out fine. Ashley promised Trish that she would have access to a car and that she'd have freedom. However, Ashley's tendency to bully and be mean-spirited was still a thing. For example, Ashley would post photos of her and Trish living together, but in the comments she would go on to make derogatory remarks about Trish and her looks. So for a little more context on Ashley and Doug, they both grew up in the same town, but Doug was older and had a widely known bad reputation. He had actually attended a school for troubled boys as a teen. And Doug's history was long and disturbing. But the worst of it was that he was a known predator and a registered sex offender with a criminal record dating back over 15 years. He had convictions for felonious sexual assault, burglary, theft, harassment, and assault. Doug had violated probation and protective orders, resisted arrest, and had multiple charges for driving on a suspended license. The list went on and on, like receiving stolen property, breach of bail, failure to inform authorities of his status as a sex offender, and people in town did know who Doug was, and they knew to stay away from him.
As for Ashley, she had a troubled background of her own. According to those who knew her, she just did not have a very stable upbringing. Her mom, Wendy, was emotionally abusive and struggled with mental illness. Interestingly, Ashley's grandmother, Betty Place, disappeared from her home in Warner, New Hampshire in 1978 and has been missing ever since. Her disappearance has long been viewed as suspicious, but Betty has never been found. Ashley's own childhood made headlines for all the wrong reasons, like in August of 2005 when she was still barely a teenager. Her family home was condemned after a health inspector found it to be unlivable. The home was filled with trash, rotting food, and animal waste, and there was no food for the children, and they also had a rooster living inside the house. Upstairs where the children slept, there was pornography pinned to the walls, and the whole house was literally falling apart. There was insulation hanging from unfinished walls and ceilings, and outside the house, animals wandered in the yard with no food, water, or shelter. In fact, when the state stepped in, they actually seized 57 animals from the Ruffs' property, including pigs, chickens, goats, geese, rabbits, dogs, and cats. All of these animals just free roaming and starving. The conditions of the home had spiraled far beyond neglect, and the house was deemed unfit for both animals and children. Volunteers helped clean up the home and make basic repairs, and the family was allowed to move back in. But not long after that, Ashley's parents were charged with child endangerment. But in a move that I absolutely don't understand, when someone is charged with child endangerment, the kids were allowed to stay in the home.
Which seems to be like the home seems to be the problem. So,
Right.
Part of the problem, obviously the parents had problems, but yeah, to keep them in there makes no sense.
No. But of course, it wasn't long before more trouble followed. Just days after the child endangerment charges were filed, Ashley's dad was arrested for domestic assault after he threw a phone at her mom. And Ashley's mom had her own legal troubles, including trespassing and other troubling behavior. Newspapers reported that she once had a huge feud with her neighbors and was known for regularly harassing them, even running one of them off the road at some point. Eventually, both of Ashley's parents were convicted on 10 counts of child endangerment, but they never served jail time. The court ordered routine, unannounced inspections of their home by a local health officer. But somehow, these convictions didn't even stick because on appeal, a judge threw out the charges, stating that the police had searched the property improperly, which I never understand that because how is it improper if you found all this evidence of
Right.
neglect, and not just child neglect, but animal neglect? And that's out in the front yard. So I feel like
Right.
how did they not have proper grounds
And
to
that gives
search?
you yeah, exactly. And that's where you would have cause to be able to search. So that doesn't make sense. But it also makes me so upset whenever there are things that like an officer would know that they have to do and it's not done. And maybe
Right.
like it's kind of like a gray area, but then the judge decides it's not gray area. This is black and white and they did it wrong. And so now what?
Right.
Now nothing matters.
It does kind of come down to just like following protocol, like to the letter, so that you
Right.
don't end up in situations where it's like, well, now we have to, side with the other side because you technically didn't do what you were supposed to do. So yeah, that's really
Yeah.
frustrating. By the summer of 2006, things were right back to the way they were before. The property was surrounded by junk cars and debris again. There were neglected animals roaming freely, and Ashley's mom was completely nonchalant about all of it. She said she just wanted the police and the town officials to leave her family alone.
When Ashley was younger, she had a strong desire to fit in, much like Trish. But instead of building others up, Ashley often tore others down to make herself look and feel better. She was known for being manipulative, and she was really an excellent liar. In school, Ashley was desperate to be a part of a particular group, and when the opportunity came, she would throw her own friends under the bus, especially Trish. Despite her rocky upbringing, Ashley did appear to be turning those things around after high school. In her senior year, she gave birth to her first child, and after graduation, she seemed to have her life mostly together. She had a steady job, a clean apartment, and a car. And it seemed as though she was moving beyond all the chaos that she grew up with. She went on to have 3 more children before she ever even met Doug Smith. When Doug entered the picture, it raised red flags for people who knew Ashley, like her classmate Chloe, who had known her for years. She could not believe that Ashley would bring someone like Doug around her kids. His reputation was no secret, and he was really a dangerous man. So Chloe worried about Ashley and her 4 kids a lot. And there was good reason to be worried. Ashley and Doug were completely toxic together and only amplified the worst in each other. They fed off each other's energy and encouraged chaos, recklessness, and cruelty. Eventually, Ashley and Doug had kids of their own, and by the time Trish moved in with them, Ashley was pregnant with her 6th baby. Ashley had also racked up some charges of her own, starting in her early 20s. She was charged with criminal mischief twice, and in one of those cases, she was accused of throwing a large rock at someone's car and causing over $1,500 in damage. She was indicted, but the charges were eventually dropped. Then, in March of 2018, just months after Trish moved in, Ashley and Doug were both arrested again, this time for theft by deception and receiving stolen property after an incident at a Circle K. By the time Trish moved into Ashley and Doug's home, things were already on very shaky ground. At first, Trish's family wasn't fully aware of the whole extent of the things that were happening. All they had were these little glimpses and these red flags that really started to add up. The first sign that something really wasn't right was when Trish started contacting Sandy from Ashley's phone. She told her that her phone had been stolen, but Sandy now thinks that Ashley took Trish's phone as a means to control who Trish could talk to or just to isolate her entirely. From that point on, calls from Trish were short, supervised, and usually came from Ashley's phone. Sandy noticed that Trish really didn't sound like herself, and she seemed very guarded when she spoke. As time went on, the calls became fewer and further between. And Sandy was alarmed by this because Trish was someone that was always glued to her phone and relied on it to keep in touch with her family. So they wondered why she never got a replacement. And Trish didn't have a lot of money, but both Sandy and her Aunt Val knew that she could have afforded a cheap phone, so it really didn't make any sense. But what made it worse is that they had no way of reaching Trish. Not just by phone, they actually didn't even have the address where she was staying. So there's no way someone could stop by and check in on things. They had to rely on Ashley of all people, and Ashley controlled the flow of information.
But Sandy held on to the hope that this was just a temporary situation and that Trish would be back in Florida as soon as her court hearing in April was over. Sandy said they were literally just counting down the days for her return. But April came and went, and Trish never came home. Ashley told the family that Trish had gone to court and might need to serve 7 days in jail, so Sandy and Val waited, but then 2 more weeks passed and there was still no phone call or any updates. Then, at the end of April, Sandy suffered a heart attack, and she waited by the phone in the hospital hoping and praying that Trish would call, but she never did. It actually wasn't for several more days that she would hear from Trish. On May 16th, Trish finally called, and Sandy heard her voice for the last time. It was just a phone call, but Sandy knew that something was wrong. She said she was only on the phone for about 2 to 3 minutes, and she said that Ashley's phone only had 2% battery, so she had to go. This conversation was very brief, and they didn't get to discuss anything meaningful. After that call, the only communication Sandy had was through text messaging, and they were sent from Ashley's phone or possibly sent by Ashley herself as a middleman. But Sandy feared that Trish wasn't the one writing the messages at all, and she might have been right. Ashley continued to tell Trish's family a series of ever-changing stories. First, she said that Trish left New Hampshire and went to Vermont with a new boyfriend, but when they asked for the boyfriend's name, Ashley couldn't provide one. Then, Ashley said that Trish was intentionally pulling away from her family because she was mad at them and wanted distance. And Sandy told Ashley that she would like to hear that directly from Trish herself, but of course that conversation was never arranged and it never happened. At that point, Trish's Aunt Valerie started doing some digging of her own. She started by calling the Plymouth District Court and was told something that stopped her dead in her tracks. Trish had never even shown up to her court date in April. And remember, that was the only reason she had even gone to New Hampshire in the first place. So when she did not show up, that's when the panic really set in. Valerie decided to head to New Hampshire where she had a summer home, and she was going to start searching for Trish herself. She called the local police to see if they had any information, but they didn't. Val didn't even know where Ashley lived exactly, so she drove to the town where she thought that Ashley lived and went around to the local stores asking if anyone knew her, but she didn't find anyone who did. Valerie was desperate for answers, and in that desperation, she even reached out to Trish's ex-boyfriend, Chris, the one who was a very dangerous man, just in case maybe Ashley had gone back to him without telling anyone. But Chris hadn't heard from her either, and he did seem concerned and said that he would keep an eye out.
Meanwhile, the rest of Trish's family was pressing Ashley for answers, but she kept dodging their questions and blamed her lack of help on her mental health. At the same time, though, Ashley and her mom, Wendy, were both posting about Trish on Facebook and leaving cryptic comments saying they were worried about her. In one of these Facebook exchanges, Wendy even claimed that she had just spoken to Trish and that Trish said that she just wanted to be left alone. But Trish's family had enough. On July 5th, they issued an ultimatum. If Trish didn't reach out, they'd file a missing persons report and get the police involved. And then Ashley responded with a chilling message. She said, "If you report her missing, you will never hear from her again." Which, if
Immediately calling the police, like, that's the weirdest thing to say.
Absolutely, yeah. So Sandy asked if that's what Trish said or if that's what Ashley was saying, but Ashley refused to answer and said she wasn't going to deal with a million questions because she had, quote, just gotten out of the psych ward, end quote. Sandy wondered why Ashley had been hospitalized, but she wouldn't give an answer, and eventually she just stopped responding. The very next day, though, Trish was officially reported missing, and the police wasted no time getting involved. One of their first recommendations was to stop Trish's Social Security payments. If she was hiding out somewhere, the sudden stop of income might push her to contact the Social Security office. But weeks went by and nothing happened. Her Aunt Val said they knew it meant trouble when Trish didn't check for her money. Then on August 28th, the case became public. The Assistant Attorney General issued a plea asking for help from anyone who may know where Trish was. That same day, the New Hampshire State Police Major Crime Unit carried out a search warrant at Ashley and Doug's home. They didn't say why they were searching the home or what had led them there, and they wouldn't say if they thought Trish was in hiding or if something more sinister was behind her disappearance. Ashley spoke to WMUR9 and really tried to downplay the whole thing. She claimed that she had no idea why the police were there searching her home. She said Trish had stayed with her in the past, but she didn't live there. Ashley said the two were best friends, so of course they spent time together. But she said that she hadn't heard from Trish herself since June or maybe July. But Ashley also said, she's not good with the dates, which is very convenient when you're trying to remember the last time you saw a missing person.
Right.
Ashley said that she believed that Trish was just hiding out somewhere, but she said she did worry about her. Later, Chloe, which was that friend of Ashley's that grew up with her, became an advocate for Trish's family and said that when she watched Ashley's interview, she knew the whole thing was a bunch of garbage. She said she'd known Ashley for years and could tell when she was lying, and this was definitely one of those times. During the search of Ashley's home, police used luminol to check for traces of blood. According to Cold Case New England, several anonymous sources claimed that they had seen photographs taken inside the home under black light. They described what they saw as a, quote, blinding display of stains and spatter indicative of something utterly ungodly, end quote. But despite this search, nothing came of it. There's no arrest, no public statements, and no charges.
In late August of 2018, investigators acted on a tip that led them to Grant Pond, and this is a large and secluded body of water just off Wild Meadow Road in Grafton. It's also less than a mile from where Ashley and Doug's property is. So the tip they received came from a woman named Sarah, who was actually living on Ashley and Doug's property with her husband Travis. A search of the pond turned up something bizarre and unusual. They found a washer and dryer set completely submerged in it. And authorities believed that this could be linked to Trish's disappearance, so they took extreme care in recovering these appliances, and they put them in protective crates as they were pulled from the water. Media reports mentioned that authorities had pulled these crates from the water, but they didn't talk about what was inside them, which was done on purpose. But what they did find inside the washing machine changed everything. Sandy said the police called and told her that they found a piece of human remains that they believed belonged to Trish, but they asked her not to tell anyone about it. They asked her if she would be willing to provide a DNA sample, which she did. Months later, Sandy's worst fears were confirmed. In January of 2019, the police confirmed that they had found a jawbone, and dental records proved that the jawbone belonged to Trish. They knew that she had been killed and dismembered. The autopsy estimated that Trish had been murdered sometime in May, just days or weeks after she was last heard from. While there's been some confusion over how much of Trish's remains have been found, we just want to clarify that it was only her jawbone that was located and not her entire body. After receiving the most heartbreaking news of her life, Sandy was asked not to tell anyone what she knew, and this included her own family. She wasn't even allowed to tell anyone that they had found some of Trish's remains or that she was even deceased. And this was all to protect the integrity of the investigation. But of course, Sandy needs someone to talk to.
Yeah.
So I simply cannot imagine finding out this news and the police are like, you got to keep it to yourself.
And they're not saying for 24 hours.
Right.
Just
indefinitely.
Indefinitely. Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah. Uh, but as I said, she was just devastated and beside herself and needed someone, in her corner. So the police did allow her to tell Valerie. But for the next 9 months, the two of them had to pretend that Trish was still missing,
Oh
and
my
they listened
gosh.
in silence as people claimed to have seen or heard from her. Sandy later said that not being able to grieve openly and share the truth really took a toll on her mental health. The family also believed that keeping the discovery under wraps may have actually hurt the investigation more than helped it, because they wondered if people might have come forward with more information if they had known that Trish wasn't just missing, but that she had been murdered. On July 2019, patience had run out, and Trish's family was frustrated by the lack of answers and the forced silence. So Val leaked the news of Trish's death to WMUR. The reporter went straight to the Attorney General's office and told them that the station planned on going public with this information at 11 p.m. that very night. So, a few hours later, at 7 p.m., the Attorney General's office got ahead of it and finally made a statement confirming that Trish's case was now being treated as a homicide investigation, but they didn't reveal where they had found her remains. The Attorney General was asked about any suspects, but they said, quote, "We don't typically name suspects. That's all I'm going to say at this point." They did confirm that they were aware of Ashley and Doug, but they didn't identify them as suspects or even as persons of interest at that point. To this day, Trish's family is angry over how her remains were handled and the months-long secrecy that followed. But nobody from the Attorney General's office has ever apologized to Sandy or Val.
In the months that followed, Trish's family began piecing together the truth on their own. They gathered tips, chased leads, and talked to anyone who might have known something, and they actually were able to learn a lot. One of the first people Valerie talked with was a woman named Faith, who had been to Ashley and Doug's home while Trish was still living there. She alleged that she had witnessed Doug backhanding Trish during a visit, and she said that she reported this incident to the police after Trish was declared missing. And there were other reports too. These reports came from inside the house. Some of Ashley and Doug's kids allegedly told the police they had witnessed Trish being punched in the face. Another woman who had met Trish once in the summer of 2018 at someone else's home said that Trish looked terrified and unkempt. She would not make eye contact with anyone. This woman said she later filed a restraining order against Ashley. More than one witness told Trish's family that the abuse came mostly from Ashley and not Doug. Ashley was jealous and accused Trish of trying to steal her husband, and she even claimed that she had slept with not just Doug, but also with Travis, who was someone that lived on the property with his wife Sarah that we mentioned earlier. Ashley used the accusations to justify verbally and physically lashing out at Trish. Valerie later spoke to a woman named Beverly, who had known both Travis and Sarah, and heard horrifying accounts from them, such as that Trish had been forced to care for Ashley and Doug's 5 kids, along with 2 or 3 kids that belonged to Sarah and Travis. Trish had no phone, no freedom, and no financial control. They regularly took money from her Social Security debit card. But that wasn't even the worst of it. According to Sarah, Trish was being trafficked. She was being forced to perform sex acts for Ashley's father, as well as their friends and even local drug dealers. In one incident, Sarah and Travis allegedly beat Trish after she called one of their children a moron. But the most haunting detail that came from Sarah was that Ashley had once locked Trish in a non-working freezer. It wasn't clear if Trish was alive at the time of this incident, but another source confirmed that it was a regular thing for Ashley to put Trish in the freezer with a padlock on it as a way to terrorize her. And this freezer has never been found. Sarah said that Ashley's father came over after Trish died and helped them dismember her body, burn what they could, and put the rest into a washing machine that they eventually dumped in Grant Pond. Sarah told Beverly that Travis was there when Trish took her last breath.
Some of the most damning evidence came from one of Travis and Sarah's children. For the protection of the child, we will just refer to them as the child. The child spent a lot of time at Ashley and Doug's house and unfortunately witnessed a lot more than any child should ever witness. When Trish's missing person photo appeared on the news, the child recognized her immediately and told their biological mother that Trish had been at Ashley and Doug's house. Later, when the child was older, they took Trish's family back to the property and described what they had witnessed. They said that the abuse started the day Trish moved in. It's believed that Ashley had lured Trish to the property because she thought Trish and Doug were already sleeping together, or that Trish wanted to sleep with Doug, and the plan all along was to get her there to abuse her. Trish was always injured and even had an open, infected wound on her back at one point due to Doug doing something to her with a power drill. The child described how Ashley and Doug made Trish sleep in an old shed with nothing but a blanket, even when it was cold outside, and they sometimes locked her in there so that she wouldn't be able to escape. At one point, the child actually drew a map of the property and gave it to Trish, hoping it would help her find a way out. But when Sarah found the map, she ripped it up and warned her child to never do anything like that again because it would make Ashley very angry.
That broke my heart that, like, the kid
Horrible.
knows how bad the situation is to take it upon themselves to draw a map. Just being a kid, I can't imagine thinking
gosh.
you've got to be, to do something in this story.
And honestly, in that case, it kind of makes me feel like the child was just vicariously hoping, because the child wants to escape too. Like,
Of
this is what
course.
I would do if I wanted to escape. I would need a
Right.
map to get out of here. And so, like, that truly is heartbreaking just to even think the child would think to do that,
Yeah.
That just goes
Like,
to
if the
show how
adult
terrible.
gets out, maybe somebody will come
Right.
help us.
Yes. So according to the child, it was Ashley and not Doug who was responsible for Trish's death. Unfortunately, when investigators learned about the child's testimony, they dismissed everything and said the child was too young to be a credible witness and that they may have been influenced by what they heard from others. So with that, one of the only firsthand accounts of what happened inside that house was just set aside. Despite everything, including the evidence of physical abuse, the discovery of Trish's jawbone, and the mountain of disturbing allegations, no one has ever been arrested in connection with Trish's death. Her Aunt Valerie has gone on the record numerous times stating that she believes both Ashley and Doug were responsible for the murder, and she is not the only one who thinks so. Ashley and Doug are literally the only people that are talked about when discussing who took Trish's life. But in the eyes of the law, they're still just regular people. And we have more to get into after one last break to hear a word from this week's sponsors.
Our cat Luna, or her government name is Lunacris, actually came into our lives as a surprise. I never would have thought of myself as a cat person, but more than a year later, my Mother's Day card actually included Luna's name. She's actually become such a big part of our family, even though she does fight to ignore us most of the time. And we really do everything we can to keep her healthy and happy, and that includes using Pretty Litter. Pretty Litter is more than just great litter. It actually helps monitor Luna's health. A couple months ago, I noticed that the color of the litter had changed, which I knew meant that something might be wrong. Thanks to the color-changing formula, I was able to get Luna to the vet right away. She started on some medication before things could get worse, and now she's doing great. As someone who is naturally anxious, the thing I love most about Pretty Litter is the peace of mind it gives me. It's non-toxic, pet-safe, and low dust, plus it controls odors and lasts up to a month. It also ships straight to my door. If you want a simple way to monitor your cat's health and make sure they're feeling their best, Pretty Litter is the way to go. Right now, save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy at prettylitter.com/moms. That's prettylitter.com/moms to save 20% on your first order and get a free cat toy. prettylitter.com/moms. Pretty Litter cannot detect every feline health issue or prevent or diagnose diseases. A diagnosis can only come from a licensed veterinarian. Terms and conditions apply. See site for details. Tell me if this sounds familiar. Something's changed, and you can't really quite put your finger on it. You've got brain fog, hot flashes, night sweats, mood swings, or maybe you just feel heavy and bloated. You're trying to do all those right things you can do, and these things might have even worked for you years ago, but right now, nothing's working. Well, it could be your hormones. And believe me, I've been there too. I totally get it. That's why I was curious when I came across Belle Vital. It's a 12-week program created by a woman for women that's designed to help balance hormones and get you feeling more like you again. The program includes a simple nutrition plan with recipes and portion control to help keep you on track. There are also Pilates workouts that are easy to do at home without stressing your body too much. I love these workouts. Plus 2 proprietary supplements that help manage stress, balance blood sugar, and give your metabolism a boost. And one of my favorite parts is the breathwork exercises that you can use for stress relief. And the best part is they only take about 60 seconds. And if you're like me, you've probably tried a lot of different programs. But Belle Vital is different because it's actually proven to work. And the best part is if you don't see major improvements in your first 31 days, you can get your money back. And that's the kind of confidence I can get behind. If you're dealing with those same symptoms, Belle Vital might be worth checking out. It's a simple, no-fuss way to support your hormones and get back to feeling like yourself. We want you to try Bell Vital. That's Bell, B-E-L-L-E, Vital, V-I-T-A-L-E, and check out this program. Then use code BV15 to get 15% off. Go to bellvital.com, code BV15. That's bellvital.com. This is going to change everything. And now back to the episode. So before the break, we were discussing the child that did speak to the police and told them what they knew and learned that the police said that this child was too young, couldn't have really been a reliable witness, and therefore dismissed what this child was saying. Unfortunately, that leaves them back at square one with the names of Ashley and Doug being the only ones that are really out there, but there's nothing concrete to connect them at this point. On September 6, 2019, 2 months after the Attorney General's office confirmed that Trish was deceased, a rally was held in Concord, New Hampshire. The message was simple but urgent: demand justice for Trish Haynes. But just 1 month later, something really bizarre happened. Former friends of Ashley, who had spoken to the police before, received what appeared to be ominous warnings when their vehicles were intentionally set on fire. These incidents were confirmed to be arson, and the vehicles were completely destroyed. But nobody's been charged, and the arsons are under investigation. Over the years that followed, Trish's case remained open, but it was largely inactive, and there were no arrests or public updates. For Trish's family, this silence was unbearable. Nothing really seemed to be moving forward. A short time later, another rally was held as Trish's family fought tooth and nail to make sure she wasn't forgotten. Ashley and Doug were called out by name and asked to give information about Trish's murder since they were the last people to see her alive. In 2023, they joined forces with other families across the state to seek justice for the families of 130 other unsolved murder victims in New Hampshire. Among the families that were present was that of Maura Murray, another case that's really haunted this area for years. The families really weren't just calling for justice, they were demanding reform. They wanted better communication, more transparency, and accountability from the state. When police have been asked about Ashley and Doug, they said they know who they are, but they do not identify them as suspects or persons of interest.
While Trish's family was holding rallies, demanding justice, and pushing for answers, Ashley was busy racking up more charges. In October of 2019, the police in Croydon, New Hampshire, were called to a home for a domestic disturbance, and when the police chief arrived, he saw Ashley in a car with another man driving away from the scene. When he stopped them, they claimed they didn't know anything about the incident. But back at the house, Doug had told the police that Ashley just left and that she was, quote, going nuts. Another man at the house named Brandon confirmed that a heated argument had just taken place and Ashley tried to take off in a car that Doug didn't want her to take, and things escalated. Earlier, when Ashley had been approached by the police chief, she threw her purse out of the car, and it was later found with a loaded gun and a spare magazine inside. At that time, Ashley was actually under a court order that prohibited her from possessing firearms. But she still didn't lay low after this. Instead, she drove to a neighboring town to report the police chief for stealing the gun and for taking $500 from her purse.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, not a great plan, and it backfired. She actually ended up getting arrested and being charged with violating a protective order and the felony crime of falsifying physical evidence. Ashley was indicted and a trial date was set, but the case dragged on. In May of 2022, she failed to appear in court, and then a warrant was issued for her arrest. She was arrested on July 5th, and she had her bail revoked, only to be released a few days later anyway. This pattern continued. Ashley skipped a hearing on July 20th and again on August 4th. Then she missed a bail hearing on August 8th and again on August 30th. In October of 2022, things got even worse when New Hampshire police tried to pull Ashley over for driving her car without a license plate, as well as a defective equipment violation, but she refused to stop the car, and a dangerous police chase ensued across multiple towns. Police used stop sticks to deflate her tires, and even after all 4 of her tires had blown out, she still wouldn't stop.
Whoa.
And the car eventually collided with a police cruiser, and at that point, Ashley was taken into custody and charged with 2 counts of reckless conduct and 1 count of falsifying evidence, both of which are felonies. She was also charged with disobeying an officer, false imprisonment, and driving on a suspended license. By this time, Ashley had 3 bench warrants and a Superior Court warrant on separate charges. She was sentenced to prison time, but she was released on parole in April of 2025.
And Doug's criminal history also continued to grow as Trish's case stalled. In December of 2020, Doug took a global plea agreement, which was a deal that included charges spanning multiple counties and the Attorney General's office. Doug pleaded guilty to an array of serious crimes, including aggravated felonious sexual assault, multiple counts of voter fraud, reckless conduct with a deadly weapon, possessing a firearm as a felon, and failure to register as a sex offender. The charges dated back to 2018 when he gave false information while registering to vote. Doug was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison, and some of those sentences would run concurrently while others were suspended. Doug actually tried to make a run for it. In December of 2019, Doug skipped court and vanished. Alerts were immediately issued, and by March of 2020, the U.S. Marshals had joined the search. That same month, Doug's face appeared on the TV show Live PD when he was broadcast nationally as a fugitive on the run. And 3 months later, Doug was finally found. He was arrested in West Charleston, Vermont, where he had been hiding out and using the name Robert as an alias. He was actually staying with his friends there. When police found Doug, he cooperated at first, but once he realized they were actually there to arrest him, he resisted and had to be subdued with a taser. While Doug was behind bars, a fellow inmate actually came forward with a bombshell. They claimed that Doug had confessed to murdering Trish. The informant even offered to wear a wire to help authorities obtain a taped confession, but the police declined the offer. Doug has never been charged in connection to Trish's murder.
And as of today, nobody has ever been arrested for the murder of Trish Haynes, and there are no named suspects or persons of interest. This has been an ongoing source of pain and frustration for Trish's family, as they believe without question that Ashley and Doug Smith are responsible for her death, as do many others who have followed this case. Trish's family believes that the initial investigation was thorough, but that the case has stalled with the district attorney's office because they refuse to move forward without a full confession from the killer or killers, despite heaps of circumstantial evidence pointing toward Doug and Ashley. And I think this is interesting that you have a jailhouse informant who is offering to wear a wire for them to obtain what they are looking for, and they can't get that done. So that you can see how that's extremely frustrating.
Yeah.
But the family thinks that the district attorney is afraid of losing the case, so instead of moving forward with a case they could lose, they are simply doing nothing. The worst thing to come of all this is that there are people out there who have tried to blame Trish for what happened to her by suggesting that making mistakes and bad decisions made her deserve to be killed. Her cousin Carrie Ann said in response, quote, "It's an awful system of justice when the victim is blamed. I don't care if, in her naivety, Trish made a bad decision. She was beaten, starved, held against her will, tortured, murdered, dismembered, burned, and her remains were thrown into a pond. No one deserves that, bad decision or not," end quote. Carrie Ann also reiterated that Trish cannot speak for herself and that the family needs answers, but they can't get that without the help of those who know something. If you have any information, no matter how small, please contact the New Hampshire State Police at 603-223-4381. And if you're listening and wondering how you can help, here is what Trish's family is asking. They would love for you to keep talking about Trish, keep sharing her story, and just keeping her name alive. You can also join the Justice for Trish Haynes Facebook group to stay connected and to help spread the word, and we'll have that linked in our show notes. And there are also flyers that can be shared both online and in person. And lastly, you can sign the petition on change.org demanding that arrests be made in Trish's case. Trish's family has carried the burden of her loss for far too long, and what they need now is help and for pressure to be put on authorities because Trish deserves justice and she deserves to be remembered.
To me, this story has a lot of similarities between Trish and Tiffany Booth. Both of them were very kind, but their families both said that they tend to trust people quite a bit. And so it makes me so sad in both these cases that there are people that very well could be involved, and we know some names and we know some faces, and still it's not really going anywhere. I personally don't understand how much more the New Hampshire Attorney General's office needs to find a jaw in a freezer in in a pond, that doesn't just
Right.
happen. That's
Yeah.
not an accident. So I feel like there's just enough there to put more pressure on the people who lived in the house. And man, it breaks my heart for the kids that,
Yeah.
were clearly witnesses to this. I don't know. The whole thing is so sad. And then I don't know if you think this now, Mandy, that our kids are older. I think of someone or people like Sandy and Steve, you're done raising your kids, right? They're, becoming adults. And now they're taking on raising their grandchild who they love and adore. But like, I think of that now. And I've always thought like, oh yeah, of course I would do something like
Right.
that. But now that I'm almost in the next stage of life, I just think I can't imagine starting over. So I have so much respect for them and just anyone that does that. But my heart just breaks for them because that's their
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an incredibly heartbreaking story, and I really hope that this family gets the answers that they're looking for very soon. And that was our story for this week, Melissa. I know we've been doing lots of different fun things on our Thursday episodes, but what we haven't done in a while, and we would love to do again, is a mailbag episode.
Yay!
Yay! We always love the mailbag episode. So if you would like to participate in the mailbag episode, you can email us or send us a story. It can be kind of true crime-esque, or maybe by some degree of separation, or we're related to some kind of a crime or just a really crazy story or a conspiracy or just something really wild. We totally want to hear the story. We've had a lot of fun on the mailbag episode. So if you're not
So
sure,
much.
if you're not sure what we're looking for, you can go back and listen to a couple of the other ones that we've done already. But we've been really enjoying doing those and reading everyone's stories. So please send us mailbag stories. Melissa, where can they send those?
They can send those to momsandmysteries@gmail.com. Please put mailbag in the subject line so we don't lose it because there's always that chance. Super excited. Love those. Please send those in. And my dad has given me a couple extra stories I can share.
Nice. I love
better.
bad stories.
Crazy.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this week. We'll see you back next week. Same time, same place, new story.
Have a great week.
Bye.